Well, hello everyone, and welcome to today's RedK Live on Revolutionising the Fan Experience, a deep dive into modern support operations. I'm Tom Jeans, Head of Sales here at RedK, and I'll be your host for today's webinar or today's session. I'm delighted to say that I'm joined today by our Senior Customer Experience Consultant, George Cox too. Thanks for joining, George. Would you mind just quickly sharing a bit more information about your background and how you sort of intersect with this topic as well?
Of course, yeah. Thank you, Tom, and thanks for everybody for joining. So, as Tom mentioned, my name's George. My role, I suppose, I wear multiple different hats throughout the day, but my title, as it suggests, is Senior Customer Experience or Fan Experience Consultant. I've been with RedK now for coming up to 7 years, and I've been within digital transformation and within customer experience, I suppose, for well over 10 to 12 years. The reason I suppose I'm sort of forefront here, having a conversation with yourself primarily, is because you could argue, have the most experience working with football clubs within RedK and also within this sort of field. I've worked with many different Premier League and Championship and League One clubs, just understanding where they are, where they're in their journey in terms of fan experience, fan engagement, customer experience. There's lots of different names that are used for the same sort of topic today. And really hoping to bring a bit of insight, things that I've learned speaking to many different football clubs, not just about fan experience, but also just sort of support liaison, understanding accessibility, ticketing, box office, and essentially leveraging that gap between technology and also the supporters as well. So hopefully I can share a bit of insight and a bit of knowledge that we've learned from sort of liaising with supporters and also football clubs this year or last season as well.
Absolutely. Thank you, George. And I think the key as well is that this is transferable across to sports clubs in general, although we will be using a lot of use cases from football clubs. Certainly, the ticketing journey, the fan experience journey is one that is replicable to many different clubs. So thank you, George. So today's sporting world, the fan experience has evolved beyond just attending those games or cheering from the stands. It's a continuous, multifaceted journey that touches on everything from ticketing to merchandise to online engagement and customer support, of course, which we know very well. So for sports clubs, modernising that supporter operations become essential, not just for keeping those fans engaged, but for staying competitive in what is a particularly dynamic industry. So today we're going to explore how clubs can leverage those cutting edge technologies like customer experience platforms, AI, automation, to transform the way that they work with fans. And we'll also look at how integrating systems like ticketing and CRM can streamline those operations and why those data-driven insights are more critical than ever before to provide that seamless, personalized fan experience that everyone is reaching for. So whether you're in ticketing, marketing, support, or strategy, I'm pretty confident you should be able to come away from today's with some valuable insights and actionable strategies to help you take your fan engagement to the next level. And really, we're doing a high-level view here. More than happy to go into a deeper dive on individual industries, individual topics as well at a later date. But hopefully, it's a good introduction to you today. So, as I mentioned, in recent years, the fan experience has become critical focus for sports clubs worldwide. This isn't just a UK, Europe challenge. This is a worldwide challenge. So, George, I was wondering if you can give us a bit of an overview of how expectations of fans have evolved and why modernising sports operations is now essential for that strong fan engagement.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, over the last decade, fan expectations have shifted, you could argue, quite significantly. At the same time, without sounding contradictory, it stayed quite static. And the reason I say that is because it comes in different formats now. In the thing of the past, the match day, whether that's cricket, rugby, football, was very transactional in that you went to the game, you turned up, you had your experience, you then left, and it was almost then you might receive something in the post if you're a sort of junior member, you might receive a sort of package if you just received your first season ticket, and it's very much that you're seen as that individual, your ticket number, your purchase number, and you were then moved on to the next stage. You might receive an email or a card at your birthday, something like that. But now supporters their sort of expectations are they're treated much more like a consumer, whether some supporters want to admit that or not. And really, we need to make sure they're having a personalized experience, whether that's purchasing tickets. But then when they have an issue, can they resolve it there and then? And that doesn't mean to say just online in terms of digital fans, but also in the stadium. Do they have that support liaison officer? Is that they're away from home? So actually they don't have the same sort of support network. Are they at the stadium? They first-time visitors? Do they have accessibility questions? Really, it's just about meeting their expectations wherever they are and giving them the answer they need when they're sort of expecting it. And really that comes in that omni-channel approach. An omni-channel for sports clubs doesn't just mean Twitter, Facebook, email, chatbots, AI. It also means physically face-to-face and actually having something or somebody as a touch point to be able to give them the answer they're looking for there and then. And I think the reason why it's quite stayed a little bit static, as I said at the beginning, is that some fans are a bit more stuck in their traditional ways. Doesn't mean they're right or wrong, but it does mean that they're still looking to. They don't want to be given something for the sake of being given some information. So it's all about that. I go back to personalization and sort of engagement. So we don't want to do something for the sake of it. And something we'll touch on later as well is data is really critical for that. So understanding about who your supporters are, knowing what touch point they want to engage with you, and actually giving them what they're looking for, and creating more of an engaging and satisfying experience with the club from all different areas, I suppose.
Great, and I guess the logical next step for us to talk about is what are those customer experience solutions that can help those support teams manage the increasing complexity of the fan inquiries, whether it is on the event day or prior to the event, post-event, as part of the engagement and brand experience that they're expecting.
Yeah, and I suppose you could argue that supporter services are the front line for everything, whether that's support liaison, fan engagement. These guys are the people on the phone. They're the contact centers. They're the live chats. They're the social media experts, and they're just sort of battling these sort of unbombed queries, which could be on match day, could be post match day, could be feedback, could be so on and so forth. So it's about understanding how do we understand what the supporters are asking for, what they're giving us the feedback about. And then how can we leverage that with technology to support them as well? And actually had a recent conversation just today, actually, with the support. They recently introduced the fact that their support liaison officers have tablets at the physical game. So now we're sort of not taking away that we're going to be asking them to put stuff into screen pads without someone there. We're having a physical conversation with somebody, taking on some feedback, answering their question, and then maybe just asking for a bit more insight that we can then action, not necessarily there and then at the stadium, but we can use technology to then capture that information. We can then centralize that into a board or to some sort of CRM database, and we can then decipher that, and we can obviously send that to the correct team or correct person to sort of handle. And really it comes back to the key word is consistency, being available whenever they need to be available, giving them the options available, whether that's, nobody wants to speak to a chatbot. But at the same time, we recognise that information is going to be quite important to handle the thousands of requests that these sports clubs are handling on a day-to-day and a week-to-week basis. So really keeping that consistency across the channels is always really key.
And you've touched on it there in terms of consistency, but what are the other sort of key benefits of streamlining those processes for both the fan and the club as well as part of that process?
Yeah, there's lots of benefits, of course, but I think it really helps. Automation is really key, and I'm not trying to say that automation and AI, of course, are buzzwords, and I'm trying to steer away from that for good reason. But it's about making sure that when somebody raises a question, if somebody look at it in a timely manner, an efficient manner, and actually is the agent best equipped to handle that question? Are we just going to give questions to support staff where they're just giving it to the sake of handling it? If we're going to give it to somebody, does the expectations get set with the supporter? Do they know that it's been handled by somebody? Can somebody actually respond to it? And if we're spending time passing tickets from left to right, or just passing customers or supporters from pillar to post, it's not really giving them the best experience, or keeping them engaged, keeping them personalized, and actually sort of supporting them as best as we can. And really, it's about understanding that fan engagement. So the minute that a fan sort of signs up to our supporter or to our club website, how they engage, what are their touch points, what's their experience digitally, 9 times out of 10, all the way through to then purchasing something, whether that's a season ticket, a club membership, purchasing a match ticket. What's that experience? And just a bit of a dissect here, Oasis is really front of mind conversation at the moment. That Ticketmaster sort of complexity that fell into it, that was a real fan engagement experience, right? Thousands of people missed out, and really what was their expectations, and it was a real talking point. Then all the way through to actually attending the sporting event or the concert, whichever it might be. And then all the way through to post that, what's their experience, what's their feedback, and how they engage. So understanding that fan engagement from start to end is really important. And that's agnostic of technology. At this point, technology doesn't come to the front of mind, but it really helps to understand how we're supporting supporters, and then how does technology leverage that gap. Okay, so right here, we need a marketing platform to be able to send personalized, engaging information. Once that person is then onboarded, we need a centralized CRM or a database to understand we have this ticketing information, their email address, their address, postcode, so on and so forth. Once they do have an issue, how are we handling that? How are we capturing it? Are we categorizing it? Are we setting SLAs? Are we setting priorities? Are we reporting on those things? Can we actually improve on these things? And as a result, then afterwards, we can get back to them and we can provide them with the information. So with that seamless journey, as I say, first of all, without technology, and then 9 times out of 10, technology can sort of fill in the gaps, where possible.
And things we're speaking about technology, ultimately it comes down to the data. And then when we're talking about data, reporting on that. So in terms of reporting, what types of insights should clubs focus on to improve that operational efficiency? And I guess how can these insights be used to enhance their decision making, both strategic and day-to-day, event day, those kind of things?
Absolutely. Reporting is not going anywhere anytime soon, and nor should it. But I think reporting comes up in many different formats. You've got reporting at a low level, so tactically. So how are we categorizing issues, which I'll touch on in a moment. Then we've got operationally, so how are our teams performing? Then we've got a bit more C-suite. Okay, so actually, are we servicing our SLAs? And then lastly, you've got governing bodies, which could be the Premier League in terms of footballing, could be the EFL, could be the FA. So all of these things have a real impact in sort of a hierarchy chain of events, if you like. So from a low level point of view, tactically, we want to be understanding what are the issues? What are the bottlenecks? Is it about club memberships? Is it about access to the stadium? Is it feedback on the stadium? And it's quite hard because in the sporting world, whether that's cricket, football, rugby, there's such a vast type of categories that we could really centralize. So we don't always want to put that emphasis on the end users to tell us what their issues are about, but we need to make it as easy as possible. So when we receive that, we can sort of categorize it as quickly as possible. But then the support staff need to have the same level of responsibility as well. So they're the low level things. So tactically, categorizations, type of issue, what fixture was it on? Because obviously you want to understand that what games are high risk, for example, particularly if it's home or away or so on and so forth. Then operationally, I'm understanding, okay, well, if we've got service level agreements or priorities in for a reason, are we meeting them? If we're not meeting them, what's the reason for that? Can we dig into the details, dig into the match days, dig into the on-site, off-site, and understanding it in a bit more detail, that perspective. And then, as I say, governally, sort of strategically, are we reporting back to the Premier League in terms of homophobic abuse, racism, so on and so forth? Are we capturing these high priority, high risk events or high risk, feedback? And are they being actioned on? Again, are we reporting on things for the sake of reporting on it? If we're not going to action anything, then what's the point in capturing it? So really about understanding that from a high level. So yeah, lots of different levels for reporting, and different stakeholders would have different requirements. And once we understand what everybody's trying to achieve in terms of reporting, the technology can obviously be designed in a way to capture all of those essentially.
Yeah, and actually, while we're on the subject of different types of reporting, I suppose there's an enhanced requirement for accountability, and I think this is something we've seen, certainly me and you on in different conversations with different sports clubs over the last 2-3 years, has been coming to the forefront a lot more in being able to better service and then externalize the accountability and reporting on that accountability for both fans and stakeholders. Is that something you've also seen in recent conversations you've been having with sports clubs as well?
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it's the whole. Historically, teams worked in silos to an extent, right? People were sort of actioning what they were looking for, and now what we're seeing is a huge trend in that the governing bodies are putting a huge emphasis on supporter services of fan engagement. So now it's not one person's responsibility, as I like to always say to a lot of our customers. There's no customer experience chief officer. There's no, there's CEOs, there's COOs, and so on and so forth. But the whole customer experience or supporter service fan engagement, everybody's responsible for that, whether you're working in marketing all the way through to on-site engagement, support liaison. The supporter can have a touch point for you at any point. So are we capturing that information? And then are we actually leveraging that information to act on it strategically or even tactically or understand that as well? So it's about combining all of that and creating that common theme, I think.
Okay. And I guess given that we're talking about technology, we can't look away from ticketing. It kind of is the forefront of a lot of these conversations. It's not necessarily the all end all, but it's always going to be one of the key challenges, I guess, faced by sports clubs that we've been speaking to over the last, let's say, 5 years or so that we've been quite heavily working in this field. So can you give us a bit more context as to why trying to integrate that ticketing system with CRM and back-end processes can help optimize that improved fan experience that everyone's striving for?
Yeah, I think if you speak to everybody with any sort of sports industry, the mention of ticketing or box office or data sends people into a bit of a panic, and for good reason. These football clubs or sports clubs have existed for a very long time. They're not like your traditional retail, e-commerce, hospitality platforms. And so what we're seeing with every single sports club, rightly or wrongly, is that there's a historic set of data that's either outdated or there's duplication. Maybe the data is not quite as clean as it could be, and therefore trying to understand what the golden source of truth is in terms of that data is very different to very different teams, and that's because there's lots of different data silos. As I said, there's different team silos. There's also data silos in that as well. And every single team historically have either used the information differently, or there's been different processes set up historically which have just sort of built on and then created a bit of a Frankenstein. So the traditional theme we have is that when somebody might have forgot their password for logging into a platform, for example, as opposed to asking for a reset password, they might have allowed them to create another account. So all of a sudden you've got two lots of sets of data. which is then very difficult to sort of target audience, make it personalized, because you've got two different email addresses. Does somebody log in with one email address for one ticket platform, to log into another one for the fan engagement? And from a sort of back end side of things, whilst for the end user, that's great because they've got the account they can log in, that's very difficult from the other side of things as well. So essentially what that means is then you've got fragmented data, and actually then trying to integrate it so to create that full 360 view, as we like to say. So if I'm a supporter and I have an issue that I want to raise, or a question or an insight or something, or even making a purchase for hospitality suite, for example, when somebody's either making that sale or responding to that issue, you want the agent or the support staff to have a full, true representation of who they're speaking to, whether that's Tom Jeans, where they're based, who their favorite player is, are they a VIP customer, do they belong to a particular account, are they an individual, so on and so forth. If you haven't got the information available to service at the right point at the right moment, it's then very difficult to contextualize and give that information as efficiently, or even make that sale or transaction as smooth as it should be. So really trying to bridge that gap. And I think the biggest challenge we have is that when we go to customers or we speak to organizations, we say the data needs to be clean. People then seem to be a bit frightened and say, we haven't got time to make data clean. And that, we're not trying to say that you can't have clean data before you can begin. Of course, that's the perfect scenario. We don't live in a perfect world. But it means that we can understand what we're starting from. So what data do we have available to us? Is it in backend systems, ERP systems? Can we integrate it? Yes or no, full stop. If we can then almost create a bit of a workflow to clean up the data in a series of events or a series of months. And we can work towards an event where we're sort of removing the old data, excess data, and we're then working with a bit more of a golden source of truth. So these processes don't happen overnight, nor do they need to be technically complex. We just need to understand where we're starting from, and then understand where the end goal is as well. And we can work our way in sort of stages up into that. So it's just about understanding what data we're starting from. The ticketing in the box office is almost like the golden hub of these sports clubs, and for good reason, because that's where supporters begin. But we need to sort of dissect that, and there's a lot more beneath the surface than it looks like. So it's all about understanding that, having those open conversations. Where are we looking to get to, and how can we build on that as well?
And since you're speaking about that, you've had good experience now with working with multiple different sports clubs who are in different stages here. So how easy is it to start that conversation, depending on what stage they're at in that journey?
Yeah, very good question. And I think it's easy to start the conversation. I think maybe accountability, responsibility comes into it as well. There's lots of different profiles, and again, I had a good conversation just this week about understanding what is the fan engagement, what is the supporter services structure, what roles do we have, what responsibilities do they have, are they defined, are they clear, are we all working in that same structure? Historically, sometimes these conversations come about where somebody says we need to improve our supporter services technology. Okay, that's great, but is that actually got an overall journey of the fan experience? Because if you're not addressing the fan experience, you're just almost putting paper over the cracks. So it's about maybe taking a bit of a step back. Some organizations, some clubs are a bit more mature in that, and they go, we recognize that we need to be offering the fan experiences of the top clubs in the world, or we need to be giving them that digital experience, because that's where the industry is going. And that's an easy conversation to have, because they're already thinking about, okay, the fan experience comes first, then what layers can we add on top of it? Do we need to take a step back and look at the data? Or is it a case we need to look at supporter services, which again, we're more than happy to support and look to that. But we need to be thinking, long term, and how can technology support that? And is the data correct? And how do we get to, take baby steps? And as I always like to say, we learn to walk before we can run sometimes.
Absolutely. And there's a key question here is that I know specifically you don't just work with sports clubs, although I'm sure you'd love that as a vertical all to yourself. How different are the challenges that you're finding with sports clubs compared to other verticals that Redcare work in across the board? For financial services, we work across the board with hospitality, travel and leisure as well. These have all got very different challenges, but are they quite similar in the way they have to approach these problems?
Well, I would like to say yes, but of course everybody comes with their own nuances and their own challenges. My biggest call out within sports clubs is that, hence the topic of this, is that they're almost like 10 or 12 organizations within one umbrella. So you've got the retail, you've got hospitality, you've got sales, you've got B2B, B2C, you've got the supporter services, fan experience, you've got the match day on site. And really it's encompassing everything into one experience. And as I say, the supporter services, the fan engagement, almost like a switchboard. They've got to be able to handle all types of different inquiries, and sometimes that retail is sort of off-site, it's handled by a different organization, maybe even the brand of the club sponsorship, and so on and so forth. So it's about understanding that, whereas the financial services industry is a little bit more one dimension, in that issues are traditionally about related to one particular topic. So it becomes a little bit easier to understand in terms of what their challenges might be. Doesn't mean to say that it's easier or harder, but it's very much focused on a particular vertical, whereas for sports clubs, you've got an array of different things. So there's lots of different topics to cover, lots of different roles, responsibilities, teams that come into it. A little bit more politics, of course, that comes into it because we're working with different profiles, globally, regions as well. Not everybody's located in the same. The club might be based in Manchester, Newcastle, Birmingham. Doesn't mean to say the support staff are. So how do we work with that as well? And again, that's a very similar problem that we have with retail, for example. There's lots of organisations that are fully remote, that are global, technology systems that are fully remote as well. So we can transfer a lot of that knowledge, and then it becomes replicable in other areas as well. So I suppose the answer is yes and no. There's lots of similarities, and there's also some differences.
I guess it's where they are on that journey, as we mentioned a couple of times. No one size fits all, but you can certainly take some learnings from a lot of the successes we've had within this field. And I know we focus quite heavily on the challenges here, so I don't want it to become an overwhelming piece where we talk about all the problems that are there to be resolved. So it'd be good to talk a little bit about what the future of support services looks like. A little bit more optimistic, let's say. So, like looking ahead, how do you see those advancements in technology such as AI, automation, those kind of pieces that are impacting the future of supporter operations and ultimately that fan experience as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the future of fan engagement is way before automation and AI. I think there's a lot more football clubs steps can take. I think it's all about the supporter. Safeguarding, of course, is a huge topic, and rightly so. Involvement. We're not just dealing with maybe the men's football. We've got women's games, under 21s, under 23s. More female football coming into that as well. So how do we service those? All supporters are all supporters, which I know is quite a cliche thing to say, but that's really important that everybody's aware of that. So what we build for the bigger side of the organisation has to be almost interchangeable with other areas of the teams at the clubs as well. So it's about understanding that. So are we first and foremost treating the fan engagement, the fan experience at the forefront of everything that we're doing? Are we putting the fan first? Have we got that use case really defined, really understood, and do we know where we sit? Do we have technology that then supporting that all the way through from marketing, the CRM, the database, ticketing, box office, customer experience, customer service, and then all the way through to post on site? Do we have the portals available? Do we have the touch screens, and how sophisticated are we going to go? Then I think once we have that, AI is then going to really come into that. We can really predict things. We can understand, can we have 24/7 resolutions, suggested solutions? And for me, I think AI, as soon as you say the word AI, everybody thinks of chatbots, and particularly within supporter services, being a supporter myself, the last thing I want to do is be speaking to a chatbot about an issue where I'm quite happy. Where's my ticket? What's happened? My ticket's not downloaded on my phone, for example. I just want an instant issue. So it comes in 2 points, is that we want to move away from deflection and we want to talk about solutions. So if I have a question, I want a solution. I don't want to be told to find my answer in a particular article. So AI is going to be a real, game changer. It's going to decipher the information on an article, identify the question that I'm asking, and then present that answer as it is there, and then without telling me, go read this article. That's the last thing I want to do as a supporter, and in any industry as well. And then secondly, it's about enhancing the people on the other side of the fence. So how can we assist them, almost becoming like a co-pilot, support staff? Can agents have information available to them? Can they make decisions as efficiently as possible? Have they got all information available of sort of a click? Integrations are going to come into that as well. And then leveraging all of that information. So the future is really bright for supporters because more clubs are putting, the supporters at the front of what they're doing, whether that's in the stadium, online as well. I think there's a lot of good stuff to come, but I think there's also a lot of foundation laying that clubs could do first to get to that next stage. And it doesn't always have to be so daunting as it maybe sounds like as well. But everybody's at a different stage in that journey.
Sure. And I guess that leads us to why Redcape? What is it that we can do to help people start that conversation and mature that conversation and bring the right conversations internally to be able to move forward on this subject?
Absolutely. Well, I suppose first and foremost, we are the experts in this industry in terms of leveraging technology and fan engagement. I think we've got lots of great use cases, lots of high-end football clubs as well. And I think we've also got the expertise to be able to sort of create an unbiased opinion about what they're trying to achieve. That could be designing the fan engagement from the very say. And we can then come back with best practices. We can point you in the right direction. We can educate clubs. We can educate companies, whether that's in retail, finance, and so on, about making the best decision. We don't need to be here for the entire journey that they're on. We're just here to facilitate, give them the foundations they need, and then build upon that. And they can come back to us with more technical challenges, looking to build on things, more complexity. We can really build on that and drive them in the right direction.
Brilliant. Well, we've covered a lot of ground here. So that brings us to the end of today's webinar. I want to thank everybody for joining us, and also for George for your valuable insights and engaging on this important conversation actually about the future of fan engagement. We've sort of already, just to sort of summarize what we have covered, really, we've covered evolving expectations of fans, importance of modernizing the supporter operations, to the game-changing role of AI very briefly, although certainly we can go to more detail on that topic for sure. Automation, and then data-driven insights, all about the data. So hopefully you've gained some valuable takeaways that will inspire and empower your efforts to enhance that fan experience within your organizations. As we move forward, please feel free to reach out to George or myself via LinkedIn if you have any queries at all, or want to learn anything else about any of the clubs we've already worked with, or what those topics we've already covered today. More than happy to go into a more deep dive session with anybody that's wanting to reach out. That leaves me to say thank you again for everyone for attending. Thank you again, George, and we'll see you next time for the next Red K Live. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thanks, Tom.